I'm Steve Shannon from 97 ZOK. I'm here with Aurelio De La Rosa, a 26-year veteran of the Rockford Police Department, with a very important sort of demonstration today. You know, we live in a state where people are allowed to have a concealed carry, to conceal a weapon and carry it as long as they have gone through the class which you teach in this area. But one of the things that I think is something we could all use an education on is the right way to conduct yourself when you're pulled over for some sort of traffic violation, and then especially those with a concealed carry permit. What is the right way? Because we've heard many stories of how things can go very wrong in that situation, and maybe you could help us understand how we should act when we're pulled over.
Well, the Concealed Carry Act mandates appropriate and lawful interaction with law enforcement, training in that field. Unfortunately, what happens is everybody has their own perception of what that is, what the definition of appropriate and what the definition of lawful may be. In my training, I try and educate my students so that they have a positive interaction with law enforcement, so that they don't run the risk of getting into a unlawful event and then possibly losing their concealed carry permit, and then they lose their right to carry. And so that's my goal whenever I'm laying out the training. And so whenever we start, I'll give you those tips and we can go through that.
So now you're going to sort of help me through the right way and the wrong way to handle this traffic stop. For someone who has a concealed carry permit, obviously you want to make all the right decisions here, because we don't want this moment, your experience with law enforcement, to go sideways.
Right. We don't want that negative interaction. And so as law enforcement officers, we're trained that the hands will hurt you. So what I advise my students to do is to place their hands on the steering wheel where they're in full view of the officer. Not kind of in this grip, but fingers spread, because because there's an ability to palm otherwise, something, or conceal some type of an improvised weapon. This one here, your left hand would hold your license, your insurance, and your concealed carry permit.
I sort of prepared, but I don't know if I have the registration for the right vehicle, and my driver's license is in my pocket.
Well, law enforcement's not going to ask you for your registration.
Okay.
And the reason they don't ask you that, because we already know.
Oh. Okay.
All right, based on the mobile data terminals.
Let's just say, because I don't have my license, you're where you are,
right?
And I go to do this to go grab my driver's license.
And what the officer's going to tell you, just go ahead and reach for it, and the officer will watch. Okay.
All right.
That you're going there.
Okay.
There's always that, obviously your law enforcement is always apprehensive for people to move, but in this particular situation, it would be allowed.
Okay. What if you didn't have this stuff by the time you pulled up? You're nervous, maybe you were speeding, and I don't know what to do, and I've got nothing in my hands. What would you tell me to do first?
I would tell my students, hey, take a breath. Okay? Because it's all common sense. But if we don't practice common sense, we don't use common sense. A typical traffic stop that I would conduct would go like this. Good morning, sir. My name's Aurelio. I'm a Rockford officer. The reason I'm pulling you over is because you were speeding, going 30 miles an hour in a 20 mile an hour speed zone. Is there any legal justification or an emergency that I can help you with at this time?
No, other than being late for work.
and so at this time, I need to see your driver's license.
Okay. And then I would hand that to you.
Yeah, you would hand that to me, and then and you would hand it at the same time your insurance and your concealed carry permit.
Okay.
Now the officer is going to give it a quick scan. He's going to when he sees that you have your concealed carry permit in here, are you carrying concealed?
Okay. And if I said yes, because that would be the point of having the card.
Right.
Okay.
And if you say yes, that's all based on the officer's perception or discretion. Okay. If he stopped you solely on a traffic issue, he's going to tell you, just go ahead and leave it where it's at. Keep your hands on the wheel for me, and he's going to tell you next. Well, at this time, I'm going to be issuing you. I need to let you know that I'm going to be issuing the citation for the speeding infraction. All right. Would you like to post your driver's license as bond? Do you want to sign for the citation, or do you have a bond card? So he's going to give you the options of what you can do.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
And so he'll take that. Another thing he'll do, he'll also verify the serial number that's on the insurance card with the serial number, the last four of the vehicle to ensure that it's the same vehicle.
Gotcha.
Okay? And then he'll go back to his car, he'll write out the citation, and then he'll come back up.
And my hand should stay there the whole
your
time.
hands should stay there.
Like,
okay?
no smoking
And,
a cigarette, none of that.
I would stay away from doing that.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
And the truth is that now, that being said, at times you may move. Okay? The thing is, when law enforcement comes back up to the vehicle, if your hands go back up, we're still good.
Sure. Okay.
We're still good. It
Okay.
doesn't matter what you did, what you're doing between now and the time that you were there. Now, obviously, if there's a lot of movement going on, it's going to raise suspicion.
Right.
And so law enforcement may be a little more vigilant then.
Sure.
But if 9 out of 10 times you have nothing to worry about.
What if I told you, like you asked where the weapon is, and what would be a situation you'd need to see it? Like, let's assume that I would keep it in the center console or slipped over here in this compartment in my dashboard.
Law enforcement could say, hey, he'll ask you, where's the weapon at? If you say it's here, it's there. And in my vehicle, he may say, at this time, sir, I'm going to ask you for my safety to step out of the vehicle and come back to the rear of your vehicle, and we'll conduct, the business business of the traffic stop there.
Okay.
And it's perfectly acceptable. There's nothing wrong with that.
And now, is it true that a person with a concealed carry permit doesn't have to disclose that to you in the state of Illinois?
In the state of Illinois, they don't have to disclose it. But again, in the whole application process, and even during the concealed carry permit training, the instructor should tell individuals that 3 to 5 days after once you apply, law enforcement knows. They already know that the registered owner is a concealed carry permit holder.
Okay.
Now, it's different if you're a passenger in the vehicle. He may have questions for that individual. Hey, do you have an ID card on you? That individual doesn't have to disclose it. But that being said, that individual, it may expedite the stop if he does, or if it just depends on what the situation is, on what is the legality of the stop. Was it for traffic, or are they making a stop based on a call of a suspicious vehicle that may have fled from a burglary in a residential neighborhood or whatever,
Okay.
So then it'll be a little bit different. Just cooperate, and because we want to get the traffic stop done just as soon as the individual that's stopped. The last thing we want is for it to be a negative interaction, and then you have a confrontation. What some people fail to recognize is that if you, for one reason or another, end up getting arrested for what may be deemed a criminal infraction, whether you get into a fight with the officer or whatever, if you're charged if you're charged and it turns out to be a felony charge or even a Class A misdemeanor, you run the risk of having your concealed carry permit revoked
Permanently
or suspended.
Okay.
And that'll be dealt by what the concealed carry board downstate or the director.
Okay.
And that is not something that an average person is prepared to do, is to go in and make that argument in front of those in that board. Many times what they'll do is they'll have to hire an attorney, and for those types of cases, a going rate for an attorney may be upwards of $250 to $300 an hour.
Okay.
Who has that kind of money to invest in? When they're trying to make their case, and even in an appeal, you may be looking at thousands of dollars. If we just cooperate and we both have a good positive attitude, we can get it done and we go on our merry way. Now, that being said, if an individual does have a negative interaction and the officer was rude, there is a process for that, and I know that our Rockford Police Department has an Office of Professional Standards, and they have a great investigator in there who does a fantastic job of investigating, those types of allegations of misconduct, rudeness, or excessive use of force.
And arguing that out with the officer in this situation is probably not in your best interest.
It's probably not in their best interest, because there is another venue for that, and again, law enforcement, I'm pretty certain that law enforcement doesn't come out here looking to get into that struggle with individuals because we know for a fact that close to 50% of law enforcement related deaths happen on traffic stops.
Yeah.
And so the sooner that we can get this done, the better off we all are.
I mean, I'll just put it this way. The idea is, yes, for us both to get home, and I'm not interested in seeing the business end of your weapon. You know, there's no good that comes from that. Like you said, there's cost. There's a night in jail with no bond. I don't want any of that.
Right.
You know, nobody should want any of that.
Nobody should want
You
that.
know, you said there's a venue to prove if you were right and the officer was wrong, or vice versa, and it's not here on the side of the road.
Right. You know, because at the end of the day, who wins? I think we all lose, and we lose as a community.
Yeah. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you for having me.
I am so sweaty right now.
That's why I had you. That's why I had
I
you.
took a deep breath, so this sweat is because it's hot. It's not because I'm nervous anymore.